right, welcome to Tuhon and Son, the grand special that we've been promising. We got a guest today, and it's not just a guest. It's Dan the Man Inosanto, the living legend, as other people besides Danny puts it. Welcome, Dan Inosanto.
Oh, thank you.
Dad, would you like to do an intro for Dan? You know, saying his stats, because I know Danny is just Danny.
Okay, well, Dan Inosanto started martial arts way before I can even imagine thinking things existed like this. And instead of starting, badly, he starts at an absolute gallop and then gets faster and faster. I mean, he studied with some of the most awesome, iconic martial artists there are in the world today. It's kind of hard not to mention him without mentioning Ed Parker, his first instructor, where he got his black belt, and then Bruce Lee. The list of both instructors and students that he's had just goes on and on and on and on. And so rather than make him feel more embarrassed than he already feels right now, we'll just say that, if you heard about him, it's because you heard about him, and there was no way of avoiding that.
Awesome. So, Dan, gotta say, it's like all these years I've known you. This is the first time I've actually paid attention to one of your seminars today, and the effect you have. And it's just what Dad was saying in a podcast we did a couple of weeks back, promoting your seminar. He was basically saying that when you explain something, it's not like, these are the rules, stick to it. You kind of have this like, well, you could do this. Or when you get to move 7, you could do this. What works for you best? That's actually kind of interesting. How did that come about?
I think I realized that there is more than one way to solve the problem. Every human being is different, so we learn differently, and we have different talents. And I think you learn things from everybody. And so I realized that what works well for one individual doesn't work well for another individual. I think as far back as high school, I realized I emulated this fullback who was much bigger than me, bigger size and stockier, and I tried to run like him, and I like to copy like him because he was my idol ever since he was one grade ahead of me. And then I realized that I wasn't him, so I have to find things that work for me and not work for the person that I admire so much.
All right, man. So let's take this back. Let's take this all the way back. Like, how did you even discover martial arts in the first place? Like, this is a different world. It's not like Friday night on UFC. This guy does this, and this, and this. And you're like, wow, I could Google that. But, back in the day, what was that like?
Well, there was no computers. So I think that, my first thing is my father wanted to have discipline. And it was right after World War II, which is like 1946. And my Uncle Vincent had come back from the Philippines. And he stayed sometimes with us. I was sort of raised by his brother, John Evangelista. And Vince Evangelista was the person that taught the 1st and 2nd Filipino Infantry bolo fighting. But along with that, he was one of the first non-Japanese to train in Japan. And he's one of the first non-Japanese to train in Jiu-jitsu. And then he also was practicing an art. They didn't call it karate. They call it karate. And before karate, they called it te. In other words, Okinawan te is what they called it. But they said te for short. And then it became known as karate. And karate became known as karate. Or as some of the people in America call it, karate.
Gee, but, this sounds like it's like when Puff Daddy is like, he's going to be called P. Diddy now. Now he's just called Diddy.
Pretty much so. But that's my first introduction was my uncle, and he taught me judo and jiu-jitsu. A lot of falling. My first kicks I learned actually from jiu-jitsu, not karate. And then later on he taught me what they call Okinawan te, which is the art they taught on the island of Okinawa.
You've been doing this your entire life. It's a lifetime of martial arts. When we were eating dinner today, instead of looking up cat videos on YouTube, you were looking at videos of people training. Like, your life has been martial arts. What was the moment where you're like, I want to do this for the rest of my life? And it's not just because my dad wants me to learn discipline or my uncle's training me.
I think that probably came right when I graduated from college. And then I had to serve 2 years in the military. And there I ran into a man who had an unbelievable record. He was Henry Slamansky. And Henry Slamansky was the first sergeant of the 101st Airborne Division of Jump School. And I just idolized him, and he had a lot of good people under him, Pruitt, Virtue. Unbelievable. It's a long list of cadre he had. They all served in Korea, and they all served in later on in Vietnam. But I think I wanted to do this because I idolized him so much. And that's when I think I realized I do want to do this all my life. However, before I trained with Slamansky, I trained in judo with Duke Yoshimura, and Duke Yoshimura, I fell in love every summer. during my college year, I'd go back and train. I wasn't very good, but I really enjoyed it. And that's when I thought, well, this is nice. I liked that as much as coaching. I liked that as much as teaching PE. And that's when I realized the lifestyle really appealed to me.
Okay, and if they made a movie about like your life, it's like Dan Inosanto, the true story. Yeah, and there was this montage when you were like really getting into martial arts. What would you say would the soundtrack of your life be like?
As far as the music, the theme, I think the theme of my life is that when I couldn't do something, it frustrated me. I was not very what you would call a straight A student. So I struggled through high school. I really struggled through college. I got a 3.4 average, which is not really good, and it's not really bad. I think you have to have a 3.5 to go into graduate work.
Okay.
And so they, on probation, they let me into the what they call the master's program. And I don't know if I'm on the right track right now, but that led me to study. And then I found out through martial art, you can really study the culture. If you study almost any subject, you'll get into the music of that culture. You'll get into the type of food they eat. You will look and find out what are the architectural achievement of that country is. You will look into whatever that country is unique in. And that makes the country interesting, and that makes the martial art very interesting.
It seems like you and Dad, you guys are like lifers. Like, there's like, I do a little bit of martial arts on the weekend and stuff like that. But you guys are like, we do martial arts all the time. We do a little bit of something else on the weekend. So when you were just you were a gym teacher? Is that what you're saying?
Right. I was right after the military, which is when I mustered out in September of '61, and right after that I got a job, and I'm lucky to get that job because at that time it was hard to get, and so I taught in the La Puente School District for 2 years. Then I moved to Palos Verdes, and that was the start of '64 because it was Palos Verdes is like the Beverly Hills of the beach area.
Yeah.
I remember being at that time they didn't have any minority teachers, but I was the first male minority teacher they had in the Palos Verdes School, and it was very frightening because my mother told me, says, "Well, they won't have another minority teacher for 20 years if you fail." So I was really...
You were making a statement.
I was really scared to death that I wouldn't fit the bill.
Yeah, when Dad mentioned you were a high school teacher, I was just trying to picture Danny Inosanto in a situation like Dangerous Minds or something. I'm like, I gotta reach these kids. What was it in comparison to teaching like a martial art adult? I'm guessing teaching a child is much more intense. A different.
Yeah, junior high school. A lot of teachers don't like to teach 6th and 7th and 8th grade because they have sometimes the body of a high school, or some of them are very big. They're usually outgrow me by the 7th and 8th grade, but their mind is not developed, and sometimes you might consider them very immature. But I learned a lot from those people too. It was really nice to see them progress in high school, and a lot of the kids I had, I got the same going to college, And about I think in 1975, that's when I started going to martial art teaching. But I also taught at the Harvard Community College, and I did that for I believe 4 to 5 years, but that's straight PE and teaching mainly martial arts at the community college level, which in California is 13th and 14th grade. So, but every time you teach, you kind of learn something, and you make mistakes as you teach. I make them all the time to this day. But as my mother says, you make it and you go on, because it's easy to make mistakes, and then you just correct it.
What was the thing about the Filipino martial arts that really attracted you to the point where you actually wanted to pursue it?
I think I have to give that to my father and my mother because they used to tell me I don't know my own culture. And then I discovered a lot of very interesting things about the culture. It is very unique. It has Northern European culture through the Americans. It has Southern European culture to the Spanish. It has Northern Asian culture to the Chinese. And it has Southern Asian culture through India. And then there was a movement from that part from Southeast Asia that came from Indonesia, Malaysia, Cambodia, and even Thai. It filtered down into the Philippines. And then because they traded with, at that time, ancient Persia, they understand the Mid-Eastern. And then because particularly the southern Philippines, you had the Arabs coming down, and they were Muslim. That's why the southern Philippines to this day read and write in Arabic. And that's very interesting because my family was half Catholic and half Protestant. So there's a split again. So I found it very fascinating in the Filipino culture. And then I realized it related to a lot to their martial art, whether you call it arnés or arnés de mano or armas de mano or estocado, estoque, fraile. Kali Radman, Kali Rogan. And then my father would give me information that weren't in the history books. I used to think my father was embellishing it. He says there was a Filipino when they discovered the Philippines with Magellan. They sometimes call Magallanes instead of Magellan. And I said, Dad, that's not what you learn. I take history. That's not what you learn. He said, no, there was. But then the books that came out in the 1990s reflect a lot of things that my father already taught me. But at that time, I thought he was embellishing history a little bit,
All right, let's get a little personal and stuff like that.
Sure.
We're talking about history and stuff. Let's get personal. How did you and Dad meet exactly?
Well, I saw your father, and the first time I saw him was with Eddie Joffrey.
Make sure you say embarrassing stuff, too.
But I remember, and then I watched a videotape that they gave me, and he was training with Eddie Joffrey, and they were pulling, not punching. And so they're doing this punch drill, and I remember Joffrey came and said, pulling. And in those days, they were very secretive. So Sealad, you got to win their approval. So, that Eddie Joffrey at that time made you duck walk around the football field, then jump squat, walk around. So your father kept up. Your father was, I think, very, very natural, though. Very good stick fighter. I've watched him. I watched him in this tournament when he was getting up in age. And I remember in Nashville where one girl, her boyfriend was fighting your father, and he goes, come on, you could beat him. He's an old man. You should be able to beat. I can't believe you're losing to an old man. And that's the one that your father won. That was in Nashville, and I don't know how Tuhon he got that, but we were in the Grand Ole Opry.
Oh, that's where Johnny Cash and Elvis Presley, all this stuff.
I don't know how he got a room there, man.
Yeah.
They didn't know what it was. He just says, well, we're going to do something culture, and there were chandeliers. And I said, one of these sticks are going to hit, but they didn't break one chandelier in the Grand Ole Opry. And that I thought was pretty good. But I've watched him grow from the time he was good martial artist. Good stick fighter, probably one of the better ones I've seen.
Oh, you hear that, Dad?
Yeah, without a doubt.
He has to say
he's
that.
courageous.
Right
No, he's very courageous.
Go in the bathroom. We'll get the real response. Go for a walk.
Yeah. So,
that's fun. That's fun. You guys have known each other for what? How many years?
32, 33
yeah,
years.
30 years.
33 years. That's good. Longer than my existence. Thank goodness. Not that far yet. Dan, I gotta say, I was not going to bring this up, but it occurred to me that I have never actually seen Game of Death. And those of you who don't know, that's Bruce Lee's last real movie that he unfortunately never finished. But Danny here, the premise of Game of Death, Bruce Lee goes through multiple floors. Each floor has a different type of martial art.
Right.
Danny, you're on one of those floors. And you have the nunchucks and stuff. And the thing I had to say about this, and the most ironic part, is of these dubbing in these movies, is that he's like, hey, do you speak English? And then you go with the most dumb voice I've ever heard. Yes, I speak English.
Yeah. Yes, that was his idea. Yeah.
Did they not want to use your voice or something? Or?
They used my voice, but then they were going to dub it in Mandarin, I think.
Okay.
So they had to dub it in Mandarin. So they just said say these lines, and then they lost the recording. And so when they redid the picture, they used somebody else's voice.
Seemed like a fun time. But you showed Bruce the nunchuck stuff, didn't you?
Yeah, I taught it to him.
Yeah.
In the beginning, he said it was a worthless piece of junk. And I said, well, why don't you just keep it and keep practicing it? And then he liked it. And then one week he came and says, I'm going to use it on the Green Hornet.
Okay.
And then that's history. And then later on, he used it in a lot of his pictures that he made. But in the beginning, he didn't like it. And then later on, he kind of liked it. He said, well, it's flashy. It has eye appeal. So therefore, I'm going to use it. And I think the same thing with stick fighting. He goes, well, it's a flashy routine, but it's not going to work because it has to be, it's too much set. That's where we taught. Well, the jab cross is set too, but we still hit people. So set patterns, he didn't believe in anything set. So when I tried to teach him, he was different. Most people, you teach the basic. He said, no, we'll just move around. And you hit me and I hit him. So that's how I taught him. Another person I taught that way was John DeJong, who actually taught me silat.
Okay.
He said, no, I don't want to learn that way. Let me try to hit you and you try to hit me, and then I'll see what I can get from this Screamer and Kali. And then I think he got to like it after that. And then when he did the long-range single stick, he used something like Largamano because his brother was Peter. Peter represented Hong Kong in the British game in épée. Épée is when you're able to thrust from toe to head. So his brother was champion for Hong Kong, and he represented Hong Kong in the British games. That's how good he was. But I think what the funniest story he told me one time that he said, I learned from my brother, and I learned to appreciate what Western fencing is. And the story about that is that he needed somebody to practice Wing Chun with. So he asked his Peter, and he goes, Peter, help me out. I want to practice my Wing Chun. I want to practice Kung Fu. And Peter goes, I don't do stuff like that. And he begs his brother. So finally, Peter says, okay, I'll tell you what I'll do, Bruce. Let's play this game of slap. You put your left hand behind your back, and we try to touch each other's face and chests and legs.
Yeah.
And according to Bruce Lee, his Peter just dominated him completely, slapping his face, touching his chest, touching his leg. He got so upset, and he ran and tackled his brother and started pounding him on the ground because he couldn't get anything on. But he said what he learned from that was the timing and the rhythm was from the épée. See? I verified that story with Peter when Peter came to the United States. I said, is that story true? And I told him his story, and he goes, I am really surprised that Bruce Lee would even tell you that story. He says, I'm so surprised that he told you this. So that's what he told me. He says he credits you for teaching him about timing and how to fake from different parts of the body. So, but it is true.
Yeah. It just goes to show about like history and movies and stuff. I've never even heard of Peter's existence until this very minute.
Oh.
But that's because he wasn't in a low budget kung fu movie. Geez, man, that's kind of.
He's brilliant. I think he has a doctor's degree in 2 engineering subjects. He's really brilliant. He's passed away now, but I thought he was brilliant. Impressed me when I met him. I only met him on 3 different occasions.
Yeah.
Really impressive, you know.
You know, you've always been such a calming presence, and watching you on this big screen today was just it was interesting. I'm just like, how did Bruce get you in this movie? Because you're so shy, you know.
Yeah, it surprised me too. I didn't really want to do it, but I felt I should do it, or else he wouldn't teach me. So that's why. That's one of the reasons why I did it. You know, because he asked me to. I even took I think a month and 1 week to get out of it because they were filming. So I asked my principal if he would allow me to take 1 month off right before school and then 1 week. So it was a total of 5 weeks so I can do this thing for my Sifu. And then as I was coming, Kareem Jabbar, the basketball player, was going because we had to film our parts at separate times.
Yeah.
Kareem always impressed me also. He was a student of Bruce Lee when he was a freshman at UCLA. Freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior at UCLA.
Yeah.
What always made me laugh, I was so excited when I found out that he wanted to study under Bruce Lee. And then I said, man, that time he wasn't called Kareem Jabbar. He was called Lou Alcindor. And I go, wow, Lou Alcindor, he's going to be studying me. You're so lucky. That would be so nice to work with him. And he goes, who's he? But then it goes to show you, because coming from Hong Kong, he didn't follow basketball.
Well, isn't that kind of better that he wouldn't... I find like there's a lot of I've heard of some people kind of like, you know, in a celebrity sense where their sensei is like a fan, and you know, you hear about this celebrity kind of like ranking up there because they're like, wow, I can't believe I'm training with him. But the fact that Bruce Lee had no idea who he is, I think that allowed him to kind of teach him properly.
Yeah, probably, yeah.
Yeah.
And he was just a freshman, but I think that was an amazing year because I think UCLA was the number 1 basketball team in the nation.
Really?
Yes, they were the number 1 basketball team. Yet the freshman basketball team, Lou Alcindor played for, or Kareem, was what could beat the number 1 team in the nation. So they used to make a joke. They're number 1 in the nation, but they're not number 1 on the Westwood court because a freshman team could beat them, and that's because of Lou Alcindor, you know.
Yeah, that's incredible, man. Yesterday on our Facebook page, which, by the way, everyone who actually listens to this, I'd just like to say thank you, because Dad sent out some invitations, and we went from having like 36 likes to 400 likes in about a day and a half. So it just goes to show that, Dad, I guess you're well liked, because when I invite people to like our page, they're like, oh, okay. Then when Dad's like, hey, like our page, you're like, yes. So anyway, I said this question. I'm like, hey, getting ready for our interview with Dan Inosanto after seminar. Does anyone have any tasteful questions you'd like to ask him? A whole bunch of people wrote them. Okay. So we're going to ask some of them because there's quite a lot. See, Dan, you're like too, apparently. All right, well, Ray McKinnon wrote, He knows about the Guro Dan fan club on Facebook, and it's getting to 10,000 fans with a lot of historical photos. Do you have a few words for these people of your fan club? Just like, I don't know. Thanks, guys.
I don't know too much about it, but that's kind of nice that there is a web page. I mean, I haven't seen it, but
it's a Facebook.
Because it's a Facebook. I haven't seen Facebook. I don't know how to use Facebook yet, but I'm hoping that my wife will teach me how to use it.
Well, just to let you know, Guro, it's a page where if it's a photograph or something and you're not in it, it doesn't go up. It doesn't matter who else it is, but it has to be about you or at least with you. And it's very respectful, and it's it's really good because it tries not to be a fan page as such. It doesn't like, oh wow, Guro Dan could do just about anything. He could jump over high up buildings with a single bound. It's not like that. It's just really nice because it allows people to who have some historical photographs or whatever, and it allows people to just sort of generally appreciate the fact that you're among us.
Oh,
that's more of a tribute
nice.
Page, really. And you can't jump in a single bound. It's 2 bounds.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Takes more than one. All right. Let's try this one.
Reg Passel asks, will there be an heir to your system? And if so, who?
The heir thing is, doesn't have to be an heir. And I'm not even planning that. I think everyone is an heir to the system. A system movement doesn't belong to one man or one system. A movement belongs to the universe. And so whether I teach Silat or Kali or whatever martial art that I teach or JKD, I don't think there needs to be an heir. But it's kind of nice that I think that everybody you teach is your student and they can carry on the art. And we all have strengths and weaknesses, and I think that's important, that no one person, because there are many people just like that. Who's the real American after George Washington? Right? And what president was more like George Washington?
The guy on the $2 bill.
So you don't really have to have an heir apparent, although that's important in a lot of systems. It's passed on from what we call a grandmaster to the master, and the master usually becomes grandmaster, and then the other becomes student. But having an heir, I don't think it's important as passing on good teaching, passing on a philosophy of sharing, loving, and making the art grow. Because I think everyone grows from the people who preceded. Without the people that preceded us, the martial art would have stayed the same. So we need the people of the past to have a good future. So in my thinking, and I could be wrong, but I don't think you need to have an heir in anything. I think if there are heirs, it has to be heirs. There has to be many people. If this is who, if there was an heir for the best UCLA graduate, who would it be, right? In what field and in what subject matter, right? And martial arts the same way. This guy could have been a great teacher, but maybe he's not strong politically to carry on the goals that was set by the founder. And I think who was the first guy that made the first grandmaster? That made that grandmaster. It was probably a caveman that said, "Okay, I'm the head of this, so therefore we'll change." So I think all knowledge is from the Creator. Period. I really firmly and strongly believe in that.
I don't know if you have an answer to this one. Daryl Sponigal. I hope your name is Daryl Sponigal and not Daryl Spoonigal, but it's Daryl Sponigal right now. In your opinion, Dan, what is your greatest achievement in martial arts and life in general?
To be really honest,
Be honest.
If I were to think about it, I don't think there's anything. But my hope is, if my great achievement, I think, is hoping to bring people together. That would be my hope, and if I can achieve that, I think I've done the job. I can't think of any one thing because I tend to like everything. To be really honest, I love every martial art that I've ever practiced, and even the ones where I don't excel in, I've learned a great deal from them. So I don't think in any one. I think if I would say the biggest achievement, I think is I like to think that I brought people together.
That's a wonderful answer, Dan. You gave me the fuzzies.
One of the things that impresses me, quite honestly, is the ability that you have to, I won't say effortlessly because I don't know what you go through, but you have an ability to basically, most every system is very politically motivated. If you talk to them, they'll tell you how much better their system is than most every other system. I mean, and we've all heard of various Filipino grandmasters from different systems saying, "But my system is the best," and you know that invariably they want you to say the same thing. But somehow you've managed to study so many systems with so many people who I know don't necessarily like each other, but you've managed to do this without making them, like they may have given you ultimatums. I don't know, I wasn't there. But somehow you've managed to be able to do this without being thrown out, without being blackballed. Every time, you go and train with somewhere, they're all there and they're all with both open arms going, wow, Dan Inosanto's back here. Great, this is fabulous. And I'm just really impressed with that ability because I know that, there are a couple of doors I can walk in and, there'll be hugs all around. And there'll be a couple of doors. I'll knock on the door and I'll knock on the door and I'll knock on the door and I'll have to go home because no one's going to be answering the door to me that day. And so I just, and I wonder, what is it? Do you have a trick to that? Or, is it part of just maintaining this humility that seems to be your...
Well, I think I want to learn. And it goes back to that. I really think the Creator or God gives us different abilities. Therefore, I recognize that each system is unique. And if we start to compare, I don't think that's where it's at, comparing. So I know that sometimes when I train with one system, they might be saying things behind my back because I do train with that system. But and I think because man is imperfect, no matter how great the martial artist is, he is imperfect. And I firmly believe that no matter how much knowledge we have and how many degrees we have, and if we really compare it, and I use this for an expression, I think I got it from my mother. He says, your knowledge, no matter how great it is like one grain of sand in all the beaches of the world or the universe. Any one thing, if you're great in any one subject, whether it be physics or something, there are other areas where you are, let's use the word, a white belt. And if you see that, everybody in your life is a teacher, even the person beneath your rank. When I'm talking about belt ranking, that you learn from everybody. And I found that to be true with in many arts, from Brazilian Jiu-jitsu to Kali, that somebody will show me a drill and I go, why didn't I think of that? I mean, it's pretty good. So I will change the curriculum, and I do that frequently because somebody has shown me there's a better way. And there's just so many ways that you can. I play it once in a while, and people don't know. I have 21 versions of Stand By Me of the song, right? And I do that with music, sukiyaki. And I had one of my students ask me, "What do you do that?" To show the student there's 21 ways of singing that song, 21 different rendition, and everyone thinks their rendition is the best. I should have played it today in the seminar. So you can see I have 21 versions of sukiyaki. No, 18,
I think the common populace is kind of glad you didn't play Stand By Me 21 times. So what you're saying, though, is that when someone cuts you off when you're driving on the street, you go, "You white belt." It's your curse of choice in this metaphor. That's really fantastic. You got all this knowledge, man. You're touching me. Some of these words you're saying, I'm just like, You're a master of it.
I don't know about that.
Matthew Remipula has asked, okay, if you can remember them all and all the ranks he has in martial arts, how many systems have you trained in?
I'm going to be really honest. I'm going to tell you the honest truth. I don't know. I don't even keep track. But
and you shouldn't.
But I just like studying and researching. It's like saying, how many books have you read? You don't know. Mm-hmm. If you say, how many letters have you written? You don't know. How many melodies have you learned since you were 5 years old? I don't think you can guess it. And I don't keep track because I don't really think it's important. I can start naming them, and if I start naming them, I'll miss someone, and I'll really feel bad if I miss somebody that I studied with. I think it's important to have what I call a white belt mentality.
Yeah.
You're always striving to learn more. Sometimes when you get to the black belt, you don't strive anymore because you think, well, I have it made. You become what I call complacent.
Yeah.
But if you think like a white belt, you're always hungry to learn more. And in history will teach you that. No matter what history subject matter you have, if you keep on studying, you're going to find some new fact almost every year, possibly every 6 months. Everybody and every situation is a learning process, and everyone is your teacher. You learn from, if you're a black belt, you're going to learn from other black belts. You can learn from black belts that are higher than you. Yeah, you can learn things from the brown belt and purple belt and green belt and white belt, because knowledge is not from one source. That is not a line. It's just true that you learn from every situation.
Awesome, Dan.
Yeah.
Oh, all this stuff, Dan. You good? You good? You seem so shy, nervous. Relax. It's all good. You're going to be amazing. Let's get back into the fun stuff, man.
Okay.
So you guys were saying, and I made you promise to repeat it later.
Okay.
That you were training a certain actor for the Book of Eli, and you suggested the sword.
Oh, well, Denzel Washington came to study with us about 6 months.
Yeah.
Before he made the picture, and I got to train him several times.
And who is this?
Denzel Washington.
Denzel Washington. You hear that, folks?
And so, Denzel Washington. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think he at that time was going to use the samurai blade.
Yeah.
And I remember he says, "No, you got to use another one." So I brought out different blades, shapes that he could possibly use, and then he picked one and then designed it himself. I think it looked like he made holes in the blade a little bit to make it look good. And actually, the bulk of his training actually came from Jeff Amata. But I was privileged to show him different types of blades and teach him several lessons. If I can remember, it amounted to maybe the 5 different lessons that I got to work with him. He's a very good friend of my friend John McClane.
And this isn't a fictional character from Die Hard. This is a real person.
No, this is the real John McClane.
Okay. Boy, he must have not enjoyed that couple of years.
No, this guy he went into the music. He actually kind of skyrocketed Janet Jackson's career.
Really?
John McClane. And he's a musician, guitarist, but he also was one of my most natural students. The same year as Sugar Ray Leonard won the Olympic game, he could have possibly been in that too, because he's taller. But he only weighs like 130 pounds. Looks like 6'2", and he had a reach. So he's faster and quicker, but he chose to go the music career thing, Unbelievable human being, And so I was very fortunate to have him as a student, a beautiful person. I remember one time when I was short in cash, he loaned me some money, and I really remember that. So. And a lot of times when our school wasn't due again, he'd come down and buy $200 worth of, and I know he doesn't need that many T-shirts, Academy T-shirts, just to make sure that we were online. So just a beautiful human being. He's very close friends, with Denzel Washington, and so
he's like, "Yo, Denzel, man, you want to get trained? You got to get this guy.
You want some T-shirts?
Yeah, Denzel, I got so many T-shirts for you." Yeah, so that's cool. Another little movie appearance. Sorry, I'm a pop culture junkie.
Okay.
That's the way I roll. Like you and Dad, you guys get on the mats and you do your jump kicks. But I was instead of doing the jump kicks, I was watching the jump kicks on the small screen. I noticed I was watching this movie called Big Stan with Rob Schneider, and there was this little cameo, this guy coming out of nowhere screaming, "Ah!" and was on screen for about 3 seconds, and I had this little inkling that I knew this man, and sure enough, I went on the credits, and it says Dan Inosanto. Yeah.
Rob got me a little, what do you call, cameo part in the picture, which I thought was kind of nice.
I've never heard you make that sound before. It's like,
That's Hollywood. You have to make some sound.
Yeah. All right. Here's Tim Logan says, what skills attributes should a part-time martial artist focus on developing?
Well, I would say fitness, flexibility, because you need a flexible body. You don't have to be super flexible, but if you're flexible, it promotes good health. It gives you discipline, so that you can practice at least 2 to 3 times a week, and that's going to help your total health, I think. So I think if you're not competing, that should be your goal. And then that goal, if you want to go to a higher level, it can become a spiritual goal, because I think if your body's in shape and you're eating properly and things of that nature, then the body can develop into what I call a spiritual person, which sounds very, very corny on radio now, but it's really
okay.
corny.
I just realized how unspiritual I am because I don't do any of that. All right, and he also asks, what is the biggest mistakes that people make when learning a new system? What mistakes do even seasoned martial artists make consistently?
Well, for me, I think we sometimes overlook something that might seem very minute or very small, but very, very important. Details. Some people are very detailed, but some people just want to get the total picture. So sometimes it's good to go back and see why the strengths and weaknesses of that particular system they're studying. Not everything in every one system will fit everybody. And I think that's what I'm a strong believer in Bruce Lee's is it should be the individual, not the system. You're creating something for yourself, but everybody wants to follow a system. So everyone has to have that Taekwondo look, or they have to have that Shotokan look, or they have to have that praying mantis look, rather than find out this works for me, this does not work for me. And it's finding a system, and I think that should be the key part in martial art, which is very hard. A good system at the beginning will encourage research.
Yeah.
They'll encourage experimentation. They will encourage creativity at the beginning level, not at the black belt level, because that's what you're developing. You can't copy anybody. If you had private lessons in basketball with Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan, in other words, probably you won't have his attributes to do some of the things that are very simple skill.
That would make sense considering Michael Jordan was a very good basketball coach. It's like, come on, guys, just run up and dunk it. What's the big deal?
You got to just find out something that works for you. And that's about every 5 years or 10 years because your body changes. You have to be adaptable to your body at every 5 years and 10 years. But people don't see that far. They're thinking of my body is 27. It's always going to be like a 27-year-old. And they don't realize you have ups and downs. You have health problems, you learn to solve it, or you don't learn to solve it. So you're constantly learning how to, problem solve. Every 9 years, that's a different body. All the cells are different, but we don't notice it, Live day by day, adapt, modify. That's important in martial art, in life, period. You have to adapt to hardship, and you have to, for some people, if they become famous, you have to adapt to that. It's a different lifestyle. A lot of people don't like that. If they're well known, they can't even go out of their own house. Yeah. I think that's where Bruce Lee had some problems. He used to tell me that, oh gosh, I don't have any freedom. And I remember hanging around with him in Hong Kong the month I stayed with him. Oh my gosh, he can't go in a restaurant and eat without 15 people piercing into the restaurant window watching him eat just from, egg foo young or whatever he's eating there in the restaurant.
Like, look at the way he's holding those chopsticks.
Yeah. So you don't have really privacy. Anybody who gets any sort of fame has to be able to adapt to that,
Mark Medeiros asks, where do you see JKD in the next 10 years and in what direction?
That's really hard to predict. Systems go up, systems go down. And I see people taking it 3 different ways. Some people are going to follow what we call the JKD route and try to make it into a system. Mm-hmm. They're not going to fully understand the philosophy. For me, Junfang Kung Fu is a system. Jeet Kune Do is your own personal expression. The more you say that, the more people will not understand because we want to always standardize everything. This is the way it was in the 50s, and it was great in the 50s. Let's have life like that. But
say that to the horse and buggy people when the car came around.
And so with JKD, people want to follow somebody as dynamic as Bruce Lee, and therefore they want to have it exactly the way that it was in Bruce Lee. But those days can come and go. There's a lot of good talent out there now. But I always thought because of Bruce Lee that he was special because he knew that you couldn't standardize things, see? And if you try to standardize it, you lose it. But we cling to that because we want it. I remember Gil Johnson, he passed away now, but he says, if you show it as it was taught to you, he says, it will die. If you show it growing and everybody going in many different directions in so many different ways, he says, show it growing in green, it will live. And he gave me this piece of note and he wrote it out to me. I shared it with a lot of my students. And then sometimes when they repeat it on an interview, it sounds like it came from them, but that's what he wrote to me. And he says, show it growing. Don't standardize it because it will die. If you get that concept, and I think I like to see it go that way, but probably not. They will probably make it into a system and it will die. And then it will be just like all the other systems. And I think it's the individual, which is really key.
Yeah, that's cool, man. That's good. You got some. All of these things you say belong on a T-shirt.
I see these people coming up to you that, of course, they're fans of Bruce Lee. Mm-hmm. I mean, and he passed away in '73. So, of course, when people couldn't ask him, they would ask who they thought would be the next person. And you'd get questions like, what did Bruce Lee eat for breakfast? As if somehow that was going to give them a key. It seems to be a big thing. And I'm like, how do you answer those people who are expecting you to be able to give them an answer to their true mystery of learning?
I think in time they'll be educated themselves. Bruce Lee went to that. Bruce Lee, when he was coming through, he got in this diet. I remember he was in this diet called the Rio Blair diet. And what it was, you drink this powder, it looked like milk, and you drink it for 2 meals, and then you have a regular meal or something like that. And he followed that for about 6 months, and then he went away from it. Then he was in another type of diet. Then he got into the thing where, I'm much better at 123 pounds than I am at 150. So he stripped down his weight. So he was going through what I call investigation too. So everyone has to go through that mode. I think we all learned something. Remember in high school what we thought was so cool the way we dress? Would you dress that way now? Probably not. But what you thought was
I hate to interject, but I still dress the way I do, and I'm pretty sure I had these shorts in high school.
But I think people...
And that would explain the smell.
Probably. I think we want standardization because we feel comfort in standardization.
Yeah.
But we don't.
It's normal. There's enough of it, and there's enough of us that do it, so that makes it normal. Yeah.
And it's hard to be by yourself. I think if another person doing, then you feel secure. And security is different from moment to moment if you really understand it. And I think that's important. People recognize that. Everybody wants something to cling to. Particularly you're with your parents, right? And that's your world. And as you get a little bit older, you break away from that shell, and that becomes your world.
Danny, I've known you all my life, and I've never bothered asking you any of these questions until this very minute. It's an interesting world. So the reason why I'm saying this is I'm changing, I'm growing, and I'm learning.
That's your JKD, Ryan.
Yeah, that's my JKD. All right, I think we got... one or two more left.
Okay.
But I'm having fun. Are you having fun?
Yeah, that's fine.
Well, some of these questions all kind of predicate to what you've already answered. So, okay, what's the hardest system you learned?
What's the hardest system I learned?
Yeah.
The most challenging system I've learned, because I started at age 59, is Brazilian Jiu-jitsu. That's the most challenging system. And it was the most rewarding system for me, because when I trained in it, I wasn't expecting to get any rank. I was training because I wanted to truly know what I don't know. And for me, that's very important to find out what I know and what I don't know. And if I can better help my students from that. I know in the JKD community, some people were so upset that being the head of a system, it was like a put down to them, I think, because I started out as a white belt. And in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you learn every day. They don't really care if you're 59. They're going to tap you because they're learning. There's no, there's not that there's no respect. It's just that you earn your dues on the mat every day, and you tap a lot. And I tapped a lot, and as time went on, I tapped less frequently, and then more infrequently, and then I got to tap some people too. Then I was growing. So I think getting a black belt in that was. For me, it was so satisfying to get that. Although I don't consider myself, I'm not a high-ranking type of black belt or tournament. But the fact that I thought it was really good for exercise. In fact, when I took Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I had a bad back. And people say, no, it's going to make your back worse. But the funny part, it made my back stronger. And so that's why it's one of the most rewarding systems I think I've trained in is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Having the Machados, I think, was so nice. I'm very lucky to get them. I know they descended from the Gracies, and the Gracies, I have one lesson with Hicks and Gracie, which I thought was, for me, that was one of the highlights of my life. It wasn't a very long lesson, but it was so good. I learned detail, and I understand why he's an icon in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. But I really love the Machado family. I think they're just great. Each one has a different personality. Each one has a different training, the way they train people. And they're all very unique in their own way. And I like the harmony in which they never make fun of each other's skill, or they're not like that, and they're encouraging. They never put down any other systems, even though they practice Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I love the Cambodian arts. I just love the Cambodian boxing. I take it now twice a week, and they're very smart. They know how to train old people. They train you just like a fighter, but it's for old people, so they know how to modify the round, maybe not make it as taxing as they would do with maybe a younger person. I just like learning, I think.
Yeah, I like learning. That's the well, like I was saying before, the Dan Inosanto movie. It's like, the learner. I'm looking at this philosophy you're talking about, and I'm like, I think that applies to the rest of the world. Everybody should always know you don't know everything, and there's always something else you can learn. The world changes, and you should change with it. So, yeah. You're like an anti-bigot, dude, when it comes to the martial arts.
But unfortunately, most martial arts promote an idea that whoever's in charge, we should worship. Mm-hmm. Not quite like a god, but we should worship the ground they walk on, and the things that come out of their mouth should be quoted to our dying day. And the reality is that we are people, and because we're people, unfortunately, you start seeing an awful lot of really, really big egos in the martial arts. Like do you know who I think I am? And that's a really difficult thing to deal with sometimes. And that's one of the most impressive things about Guro Dan, is the fact that he never gives you that feeling. It's always, I've seen him have people come in. I've been to a number of seminars with him over the years, and people would be visiting, and I'd see them come up and I'd see them do things, and they'd want desperately. They would sell their children if they could become, known as a teacher of Guro Inosanto, because that would give them such faith in the things they do. And it's kind of weird because you see them and
it's like, why is this on your driver's license?
But it's more than that. It's like but it's amazing because you see these people and they're willing to, the stuff that they promised their teacher they would never show anybody in for the rest of their life. In 4 minutes, they're trying to get Guro Dan to watch them perform this. And it's really kind of weird because you just sort of go like, wow. And you realize that he has this kind of like, I don't know, I guess call it a transgenerational power. Just like this thing, like, I have to show this to you because if I can get your okay, then I'm okay. And it makes me be better because of that.
What's the song that you're rocking recently in the old headphones?
I just play with
Stand By Me.
Stand By Me. 20 versions of it, all in a row.
I'm going to ask a question before I started doing Filipino martial arts some odd years ago, I started training in this martial art called Kembo, which is from Hawaii, and it had similar roots to what you did because you were training with, Mr. Ed Parker, and who had Hawaiian. He was born and raised in Hawaii, moved to the mainland, and he'd also trained for a short period of time with the Emperado brothers. The reason I asked that is because once I started doing Filipino martial arts, I started realizing there were an awful lot of connections between what the Hawaiians were doing and what the Filipino contribution was. And I'm just curious, was that something that people of a Filipino background knew about those arts, or was that something that, because I would mention that later on after I'd been doing some Filipino martial arts for 4 or 5 years, I'd go, wow, by the way, did you realize that this and this and this and this and this and this looks just like this and this and this and this in the Filipino martial arts? And some of them would go, I don't know what you're talking about. But other ones would look at me with those eyes of, you're a white guy, how did you know this?
Well, at that time, I think because Hawaii was the melting pot, Kembo grew. And some people were more into the karate part, some people were more into judo and jiu-jitsu part, some people were more into the Kempo part, and some people were more into the Bo part, which is Chinese boxing. So I think, like anything else, if you go through school, you have a curriculum, but you might excel in 2 subjects, and the other 2 subjects, maybe you're mediocre, and probably the next 2 subjects, you're just average. And then you have the guy that they excel in all the areas. But I think Hawaii is a natural melting pot of a lot of different Asiatic group. Okazaki came from there. Mm-hmm. Okazaki's, these guys were ahead of the time. I think he's the first one that taught non-Japanese the style.
I think he got ostracized by the Japanese community as a result of that.
Yeah. I think he's the first one that made a female instructor, which a lot of people at that time go, well, a female instructor. So Emperado brothers were young, and they were great street fighters. and then they made it into a system. Most of the people in Amparado's system are of Filipino descent, except for Okamoto. He was one of the few Japanese that ran around with the Filipino guys. Richard, I think. Takamoto, yeah. That's a very outstanding group that they had, like Amparado's group. Very unique. They're fearless. They will, because they grew up finding sailors and stuff like that. So
that's amazing about Hawaii. It's like all I know about Hawaii is what those Elvis Presley movies show.
Yeah.
And Elvis Presley practiced Kempo.
Yeah.
So, hey.
That's right. He practiced Kempo with Ed Parker.
Yeah.
And then he also took from Henry Slamansky, who was quite an icon at that time.
And he was a practitioner of Chitoryu karate under Dr. Chitosi.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah.
Which was my first style, and I don't know why I know that. But anyway, it's one of those things that seems to permeate your brain occasionally. But actually, one of the things that would amaze me, because I was surprised, so one of your great friends, Ted Lukai's father, Lukai, was also a good friend of Joe Halbuna.
Wow.
And it turns out that Joe Emperado met Lucky Lukai at Joseph Halbuna's house in Hawaii. And so it amazed me, because then, to me, it said, well, there's another connection. There's a connection of a high-ranking Kajukembo guy interfacing with a very high-ranking practitioner of the Filipino martial arts. Since you never hear about it, and of course nobody ever tells you these things, you go, okay, well, what could possibly be that route? But it's interesting when you see things like that.
Yeah. I was told that Eskrima was taught to the higher levels of Kajukembo, but they made sure that this guy was, you would call it the in-group.
Okay.
So, but they never taught it to other black belts or other brown belts until they got the black belt. It was something that was reserved for them. That's what I was told. So they reserved it for the black belts only. But a lot of the better people in Kajukembo knew Eskrima, but just didn't teach it. They taught it to themselves. And Eskrima at that time, too, there were a lot of them didn't even teach their own son. And I remember that with one particular practitioner. He goes, "Dad, why didn't you teach me?" He says, "Because you're hot-headed and your brother's not. That's why I taught your brother, not you." Sort of, and I go, wow, that's pretty good. That's what happened to Lucky Lakai. Lucky Lakai was not taught. Usually you teach the weaponry first in Kali, and then you teach the empty hand. But because Lucky Lakai, at that time, he told me, this is Lucky Lakai saying this to me, because he had a temper, they says, don't teach the weaponry. Teach him only the empty hands. So that's why he went more into boxing. And his father was Kid Ventura. Kid Ventura was the sparring partner of Kid Morrow. Kid Morrow was a great Filipino fighter. He's the only guy that ever tried Henry Armstrong 3 times in a row. And so he's not given too much notoriety, Kid Morrow. But when they trained in the beach, they would spar, sometimes without the boxing glove. But they would go so close, full power, but never hurt each other, just coming short of the target. And people say, well, the heavy bag work in the Kali, in the Eskrima, they said it comes from hitting the bags. And the only time you should get hurt is in the ring. So they knew how to train spar without the boxing gloves. They would spar round after round, just timing drills. So they knew how to train. They didn't scrimmage every day. So that was brought up. In fact, I remember being reprimanded by Lucky Lakai one time. He says, "Dan," he says, "this kid has a cut lip. The other one has a little bruise in his eye, a little cut in his eye." Says, "You don't know how to train him." So he explained that to me. It's 3/4 power or 7/8 power, but you don't really hurt your training partner. And I said, "What do you mean? Because when you really punch, you might be short of the punch." He says, "No, you won't." And he says, "Do you do the same thing with the live blade?" And I go, "Yes, but that's different, isn't it, Lucky?" And he goes, "No, it's not." He says, "You come close to me, I come close to me. We're using live blades. Have you ever cut me?" And I go, "Thanks goodness not." And they can go full board. But then it says, if you wanted to make a cut on me or on a tire, you could do it. But because you know the control. And that was their belief at that time. Now, whether they're right or wrong, I think they proved the point.
Dad told me a story that when you started at Bruce Lee's Academy, it was quite a commute from your job to being there on the weekend.
Yes. Because at that time, I was living in La Puente. And then I moved to Torrance. So to train with him, I had to commute to, at that time, the first place was more like West LA area. I followed him from 3 different places, but usually I had to come from that distance. And sometimes it could be 45 minutes to an hour, depending on the traffic. But I enjoyed every minute, I think one time you can get overboard, because I remember when I was teaching for Ed Parker and Bruce Lee, and on a 7-day week, I taught for Ed Parker 4 days, and I taught for Bruce Lee 4 days. and a 7-day week. And people say, well, wait a minute, how is that possible? Because on Saturday, I taught for Ed Parker in the morning and Bruce Lee in the afternoon. So on Saturday, I taught for both instructors.
You're getting exhausted just listening to this.
Yeah, because and that's something, it's a learning thing. You make mistakes. I didn't probably get enough maybe sleep at that time. But as time went on, you get to learn how to pace yourself. But I enjoyed it.
That's quite a schedule.
Yeah, it becomes a little hard probably.
But it's, it just seems when you have knowledge of something, sometimes it's hard to enjoy a dramatization of something when you just know better, when you just know fact. For instance, and I'm not going to ask you on your specific opinion about this, but I'm making a comment.
Okay.
Is that as a child, I remember seeing this movie called Dragon, a Bruce Lee story, and my one thing was, where's Danny? And I'm sure there's only so much time to do something, but I noticed that in the movie he gets his back broken by some, I don't know, revenge plot or something like that. But I do know in real life he did hurt himself quite badly.
Doing good morning exercises with a little bit too much weight, 130 pounds.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
You don't have to really have that much weight. I think the bar by itself is good enough. He did hurt his back, but it wasn't in the fight like the movie.
Well, one of the things that I'll be very honest with you, that amused me about that movie was in their school they had a mukjong, the wooden dummy, freestanding in the middle on some bricks, which is kind of funny if you ever used one, because you're of course hitting against it and it's sliding along those little arms, bars and whatever. And if anybody was ever to hit this thing, it would just fall over and crash.
Yeah, that would be inaccurate.
I don't know. It's a really well-made movie, and I'm like, if I didn't know better, I'd be like, wow, everything is.
I think it's a pretty good love story.
Yeah, it's a good love story. It does what it does. It's a movie. It's not a documentary. It's a movie. It's like,
There's probably a lot of things inaccurate, but I think it's a good movie. It's like watching versions of lighter.
Just this is kind of a semi personal question, I suppose. But unfortunately, when Bruce Lee died, you lost a teacher, you lost a friend.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
When you look back on him, what was the one thing that he told you that still sticks with you today? Just that says, I'm proud of what I do, and I'm glad I keep doing it.
Well, for me, I think the proudest moments I remember with him, I think is...
All right, we're going to put a pin in it right there, folks. We asked a question, and it opened up a whole new world of stuff, and a great world of stuff, so we're going to have to add that in the next episode. You're just going to have to wait till next week. Just like the Batman and Robin classic cliffhangers in the 60s. Batman and Robin got eaten by a clam. What will happen? You'll have to find out next Tuhon time, next Tuhon channel. But in the meantime, you should really check out Dan Inosanto's website, which is...
Inosanto.com.
Inosanto.com. You can find out so much about where Dan's going next, more about him, and he's located in Los Angeles, correct?
That's right.
Awesome. So if you're in the Los Angeles area and you want to go to Great Martial Arts Academy, go to the Inosanto Academy. And if you just want to learn from the man, there's a chance he could be coming to your town. You just have to look up on the website and find out if he's coming to a seminar near you.
He also is available on Facebook. They've got a Facebook page under the Inosanto Academy of Martial Arts.
And if you want to have some fun and you got some old photos of Danny, there's a Danny Inosanto fan page. But it is not officially connected to the Dan Inosanto Academy, but it is officially connected to all who adore him.
Do we want to forget our academy?
I like to forget her. No, I'm just kidding. No, our academy is Gamma. You can look us up on MontrealMartialArts.com. And if you want to throw us a bone and like us on Twitter and follow us on Facebook, that's Tuhon Son on Facebook. Thank you for listening to Tuhon Son. I am Ryan Stick Gelina.
And I'm Philip Tuhon Gelina.
See you next week.
Also, thanks for listening.